The traditional textile industry is made of rags, which are put into machines. It shreds it, and then it is stuffed. They are cut to 4 or 5 centimeters, so that they can be worked and the yarn can be made. Once the yarn enters through there, this cylinder that has all these spikes, what it does is to open it, open the material, and at the same time wrap it. This goes at enormous revolutions. We close it, we throw a little bit of material so that the process can be seen how it enters and goes through these 2 rollers. That was used as a feeder. Once it has been picked up and the cylinder has wrapped it, unwrapped it, or opened it, what it does is to take it through the middle of this fan and it passes to the room where it is already fed to the assortment. Here it is seen that the flakes are already open, ready to enter in the assortment. That is the way it is called by us, in the carding machine. Once this is put into the hopper, here at the bottom there is a loom with steel bristles and some combs that also have steel bristles. It goes up the yarn flakes, and what these do is that it picks up very small flakes with a fundamental purpose, and is that behind there is a scale. If the flakes are very big, when the weight of the yarn falls on the scale, it would deceive us. Instead, if it is falling flake by flake, very small, it is much more reliable. It's pulling it down so that it does not rise too much, and it's falling on the scale. If here we have put, let's say, 100 grams, it will come out in a thread of X's. If we put 200, it will come out double. It is entering by means of these 2 feeders. Here, it is seen perfectly, and it already enters in the first body that are these, all ready to begin to tease. They are steel bristles, like the old carders where our ancestors used to do the carding of the yarn. The bristles go with a hook. It is a hook, and they are sharpened. When the yarn, what it does is that it's picking it up this way, and the small one is the one that is being taken so that it goes carding it. This goes in there, little by little. The big cylinder goes working very slowly, about 100 turns per minute, more or less. The peeler, so-called, this one goes faster, and the cylinder goes slower. It's taking it away. The small one, it's taking it from the big one. This goes continuously. The fiber goes through all the cylinders. It arrives at the end of this section, and this cylinder passes it to the next section. It does the same operation again, but here again the plectrum is thinner than here. Here it is where it begins to do already. Here we can start seeing a small veil, and we see that the fibers are already in a direction. This loom is leaving it as it is coming in this other one of down here, and it is creasing it. This is a device that comes and goes. It creases it and comes out. It comes out of this loom, it puts it here, it comes here. This way you can see that it enters. It takes it between these 2, and then it attaches it to this other little table. This one creases it from one side to the other. This is the end of the carding process. From here, from this veil that comes out, which has to be as perfect as possible, this is where begins the process of making the thread. As it can be seen, it enters through these 2 rollers, which in their turn are followed by 2 other larger rollers. But these, here it can be seen that there is a core and a hole, but each core has a belt. When the material enters, the veil enters through these 2 rollers as it goes along, and the belts are crossed. The core acts as a divider. It divides as if it were cutting. What you do is that as the belts are crossed, each one takes a part of the veil that has been seen at the exit of the machine. Here, already at the end, is where it starts. Here comes out the circular thread. All these are the threads that carried the corresponding belts. Here it comes out circular. It is folding it in these wooden spools. It is making some bobbins that when they arrive to a certain diameter are taken out, and each one takes the threads that have been coming out of there. This is the twisting machine. It's called tkaninę. What it does is, to the thread that has come out in the carding machine, it gives the corresponding resistance to the thread. What it does is to twist it. Once the tube is full, once it's removed, an empty tube is put in, and this is the one that is removed from that machine. What was done was to pass it through a purger, and if there is a big knot, it stays there. The thread breaks. It is fixed. There is a tensioner, and that way these bobbins are made. Of course, here 8 or 10 bobbins fit. Why was it done here? Because this was already going directly to the machines. The thread of yarn manufactured in the spinning mills of Prato Luengo became the raw material needed for the making on the looms of the popular wipes. This is a shuttle, and here is the bobbin where the thread is inserted. We put it on. This roll is called folding. This one here, which is where all the thread goes, this would be called the warp thread. This is a folding machine that was made up in a warping machine. That's what we're going to see below. This is more or less where the folders were made. Of course, obviously, this takes quite an important amount of thread, which are made here. They are put on this roller in this cylinder, in this one that is here. Some turns are joined with a clock that is there. Depending on each folder, it has some turns. It is necessary to make some proportions all the same. This would be more or less like this. This would go on like this, more or less. An amount of turns would be made. Then it would be put again. This one goes like this. Another one would be put here in a row.
Pondríamos aquí otro. Seguidito. Y entonces sería, ¿ves?
We fill it all in to more or less the width that we want to give. Here behind, we would put the folder. This was called passing the threads from the cylinder to the folder was called rolling. Then the folder was lowered through this hole that you see here. It was very, very heavy. It had to be lowered by 2 or 3 people. This is a rolling fuller. As you can see, it's all wood. What does it consist of? It consists of wetting the fabric. The fabric goes turning around, it heats up, and what it does is, the word is enfortir. In order to full a fabric, normally in 2 hours, it would not go down, or did not go down at all. Let's see, this is a washing machine where the fabric was degreased. This, after fulling, here it passes through the rollers. It was filled with water, and here it was washed, degreased and washed, practically with just nothing more than water. Now we start looking, and we download the fabric on the irons. All of the fabric has to be taken to the edge. Now we proceed to hook it here at the testera, which is to stretch it.
Un poco más acá. Ahí.
Here we do the same thing. We hook it here.
Aquí.
Now the fabric has to be stretched. We put it from here and we stretch it. Now the fabric has to be stretched. Now I stretch it. More or less like this, the fabric is already stretched. Now we proceed to the process of encircling the fabric, which would be to hook the spikes with the fabric both at the upper and lower sides. Now we're going to do it from the lower part, exactly the same way. Now we start making the lower one. The lower one would be the same thing, to go throwing spikes. Normally, of course, it's all about the fabric drying, when the day is better, before it dries. Sometimes there have been seasons when the rain comes or the snow comes. The fabric remains here for a week. Afterwards, what we did then was to tighten it, to remove the wrinkles and to make it to measure, of course. We turn it around at the back, we tighten it with the irons and a pin. There were some holes, and these holes were the ones that gave the measurement. Here, with the iron and the pin, we lowered it to give the mark and stretch it, and it gave the mark. Each bar has an iron. We would give it, stretch it, and gave it the mark. This was a hanger, which was where the fur of the fabric was taken out. You see? Here it has some little hooks, and this is like it was going around combing the fabric. Here it combed it, then it had some brushes that brushed it, and what it did was to remove the fur. This is called a hanger. In the past it was used with cards. I still have some of them here. The fabric would come through these rollers here. It passed through here, turned around here, passed through here, and rolled up here. The last thing that has been done is a red wipe, because it depends on the fabric that is put on. It leaves the color. Look, here is green and the last one is red. More or less, this would be a finished wipe. This one is ready to be used for making up. Let's say there would be skirts of regional costumes, skirts, vests. A documentary reference of what is today called Zaldo dyeing is found in 1849. Its activity, for which it needed water from the Oropesa River, was based mainly on the washing and dyeing of yarns and on the fulling and dyeing of garments. The water enters through this conduit, arrives here, and here there is a washing place. It simply lacks a basket in the middle so that the yarn does not go away. It was stepped around, and once it was clean, the stopper was removed. It goes to the water, and the yarn remains. It's very simple, the washing place. What is the dye itself is this, which is the only one left, because here there were 2 others, and here in this part there were 3 others. The garments were brought in by the manufacturers, and we finished it here. We dyed the wipes, the barrettes, socks, and knitwear. In general, we had open lights because otherwise the steam would not come out. We had to have the roof open and nothing of heat. The heat, if you get a little close to the boiler, yes, but as soon as you took out a meter, was all cold, and then walking with cold water always. In winter, were hard, very hard. When electricity was introduced, the fulling mills were installed. With a connecting rod, simply with a connecting rod. The fulling mill goes by transmission. The transmission is at the top. This is the movement it had. These are the 2 mallets that are hitting, and when hitting is when the yarn penetrates and the cloth is made. In 1935, the textile village had 7 barrette factories, which sold 1.5 million units a year, also abroad. The last one that closed its doors was Augustin Mingo's after his retirement in 2001. Its facilities were preserved as they were on the last day of work. The barrette is very laborious. From the moment it leaves the loom until it reaches the consumer, has to go maybe 20 or 25 times through different hands. The barrette has to be pure yarn. Why? Because then when we take it to the fulling mill, we want to turn it into cloth. It has to be yarn for it to be so. If not, it is not going to reflect in the measure, neither anything. First, the spinning is essential, and if the thread is perfect, then it makes the loom that we have behind us work at 100%. Because if the spinning is not perfect, the loom takes out from time to time a big piece of yarn, which will be missing when the barrette is finished, so the barrette will not work. Once it has come out of the loom, it has to be attached. From the loom, it comes out elongated. We have to attach it, and then it takes the circular shape. Then you have to put a little tail, precisely in the center, in the little hole that remains from the union. It had to be hemmed, which was a perfect finish. Then the loom can always take out some stitches. It has to be sewn, and it has to be reworked. Therefore, once the barrette is already sewn to the seam, the tail is done, the hem is sewn, and it is well checked so that there will not be any mistakes at the end. It is taken to the fulling mill. After the barrette has been fulled, it has to be stretched, taken out of the fulling machine, stretched, and the tail has to be given the right size. So there's a person who takes the barrettes from the drawer, puts them in the saka, takes them to the factory, an operator puts them well so that they are not wrinkled, puts the tail in the measure, and they are ready for dyeing. It goes to the dyeing. It comes out already dyed, and again it is necessary to put it again well. Then, if the yarn is perfect or not, because if the yarn has had straws, they have to pass it through the straw killer, which is a product that they put in the dyeing. In short, sometimes it's not visible at the first time. Then, it comes again. Put them in the saka very carefully so they don't get wrinkled. They bring them to the factory. They bring them from the fulling mill to the factory, which normally was not the same place. So they put them in last, which will then make the barrette look like it has been ironed. In fact, it is something like it is ironed. Once they have put it in the field is the circular part. They have to put the selvage perfectly so that it is also well marked. When we wear the best one, it does not have any edge anywhere. They would hang them on clotheslines, and they would remain there for 2 days. Or they would take them out to the street in good weather, and they would keep them in the street. Then they put them by measures. Then they had to be hung. Hung means to card, to take the fur out of the barrette. Once the fur was taken out, it went through the crosspieces. There were 2 crosspieces, because one had to cut the field. It was different because one cut the field, leaving the tail free, and then the other one cut all the fur from the collar, which is called the part of the barrette that is underneath. Afterwards, the tail had to be sheared because if not, the machine would take off the tail. It was necessary to shear it, to check that it is perfect. The barrette was very laborious in terms that is a garment that has to be perfect when it goes to the packaging. But once the barrette was sold, we sold it to the person who finished it. What does this mean? Afterwards, the barrette had another task. It was to dress it. For example, it had to be given the exact size to put on the chamois, for example, as a collar. They already had a steam machine that helped, but it is a person who has to shorten the selvage, stretch it, and it is another 2 times that it goes through the hands, as I was saying before. I have this machine semi-assembled so that people can see all the screws that are needed to make a miserable sock, and they have to be tight or loose, because otherwise the sock comes out badly. These are the tools and needles of the machine, although they look all the same. They are all different. Why? Because of the notches it has, because some pieces sent the needles at the upper end and others at the lower end to make the knitting of the sock. Each one has a number. The one that broke was changed because there were some very good knitted socks. Our company worked everything in raw, and then we dyed it. In raw means that it is all white, virgin, and then we dyed it and gave it the color we wanted. These are raw, that are then dyed. This is the crude color that is then taken to the dye, and it results in the color that you want. I told them that when it was sewn, it was ironed before dyeing. Why? Because that way it didn't wrinkle. Otherwise, the dye is very treacherous and brings out all the wrinkles. It was ironed. Then the dyeing was applied when it was already ironed. This is the weight that we have for the dyes. These are the weights. We also used coins to weigh them, of these realitos. They also acted as weights. This one was the laboratory. When we had the color already taken out, this one we liked, whether it was yellow or red or whatever, we dyed it in this other one. This way the sock entered, and this is already a crude color. From there, it was drained here, which is a centrifuge. It was drained, and from here it goes to the washing machine. This machine is called remaniosa, for socks as for barrettes. Some for thicker, some for thinner. This is one of the most difficult things in the factory, because it has to be done in the same way as with the hand, sewing by hand, putting stitch by stitch, but that it matches, because if it doesn't match, it comes out broken. These are the articles that I had in the company. Some are missing because, as I didn't expect to do what I have done, I don't have them all. What I have done is a little reminder. That's how it is, and that's how I served them to the store, for example, with their bag, with their label, and so on. It was quite popular with the public. The Ochoa family's workroom is one of those that still continue to make socks. Now it is making the toe, you see? It is turning half a turn to one side, half a turn to the other side to make the toe so that it can be pulled up and then increase. Depending on what it is doing, it is working different guides. Now it's putting an elastic on the base of the foot. When it finishes making the toe, it does the same thing. All the guides are lifted up. Then I put the thread. Then the whole machine is unloaded and it goes out from the bell. Do you see? Now here's where this thing starts up. The person is just putting socks in. When the back part, it's turned, there's 3 plates that closes it, they're hot, and irons it. When it comes over here, with the photocell, it lifts it up and pulls it out over there. It doesn't fold it there. The operator, all he does is to put it in, and to take it out, it immediately takes it out. The other one comes out, and so on. When it has 6 or 7, the basket rotates so that they are not all piled up. These are already ironed. It puts them in boxes, then we bring them here, we check them to see if they have any defects, and we match them so that they are the same. We put assortments, we put a band, and then they are put in a dozen. We put another half dozen in, and then the packages are made. Here we already have a dozen bagged in 3 colors each package, and ready to go to market. Today, the leading companies in Prado Luengo, following the sock-making tradition, have modernized with machines that make them competitive in quality. At the same time, they have specialized in state-of-the-art garments, done with the most select and innovative raw materials available on the market. Due to the high quality of their products, these companies are exporting socks from Prado Luengo all over the world. Different particular initiatives have meant that the enormous heritage generated around the textile activity is not only in clear danger of disappearing, but it is in a progressive and accelerated degradation, which is visualized daily. A cultural wealth that needs a process of recognition and management that enables its conservation and transmission for the future. This initiative must be combined with the constant renovation and entrepreneurship promoted by professionals and businessmen of the textile sector in Prado Luengo.